We now turn to Craig Plumley, Senior Business Development Manager at BMO Insurance, and his session is Estate Planning with BMO Guaranteed Investment Funds. You can expect to learn how seg funds can deepen trust and drive referrals with case studies and 2025 updates. Craig, over to you. This is us diving into the estate planning side.
Thanks very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Well, what I'm going to be doing, talking a little bit about estate planning with the BMO Guaranteed Investment Funds. Again, my name is Craig Plumley, Senior Business Development Manager for seg funds and annuities with BMO Insurance. And so what I'm going to be doing, I think I'll just quickly go through my agenda here. So I'm just going to very quickly go through a little bit about seg funds and some of the key advantages, obviously, of using for their estate planning. But I really wanted to focus in on the 4 case studies that I've put together for this presentation. It's actually more like 5. And then we have our new GIF e-app. I'm just going to quickly touch on that as well. We're quite excited about it. We've had fantastic feedback on that new e-app. So, I mean, in terms of the wealth transfer advantages of seg funds, I'm sure many of you have seen some presentations in the past in terms of some of the key elements. I'm just going to kind of go through some of those, but also shed a little bit of light on some key areas that you really should be focusing on in terms of discussions with your clients. So obviously, there's the main guarantees, obviously, in terms of the seg funds, whether it be the death benefit or the maturity guarantee. The maturity guarantee tends not to be as big of a guarantee that's spoken about recently, but I think what you'll find is that our 100% maturity guarantee is actually quite unique. So I'm just going to touch on that quickly. One of the key elements, obviously, is bypassing probate. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but obviously there's a number of fees there and it takes quite a bit of time to get through. So it's just the ease of getting through that, I think, is a big selling point. Particularly going from 6 to 12 months, in some cases several years, down to a couple of weeks. That is a huge selling point, I think, with every client that you'll be speaking with. Also often overlooked is the privacy aspect of seg funds. I think a lot of people like the idea that if they want to leave some money behind to someone or a charity or what have you, and they don't want to be having any contesting of the will, that privacy is a very strong selling point as well. So certainly not to be overlooked in your conversations. Creditor protection, just had a call about this today. Someone was worried about a potential situation they were getting in and they wanted to know about creditor protection. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to make sure you set that up correctly to ensure you do have creditor protection. But certainly for all the small business owners out there, a great thing to be talking about, especially sole proprietors. And of course, the annuity settlement option, which is a great way to basically build a trust-like structure right into the contract of the seg fund. And I think is worthwhile bringing up all the time because there's usually one kid that they ought to be talking about that with. So in terms of the probate process itself, I think, I already talked about the lack of privacy. Obviously, your will is completely public. So a lot of people don't like that aspect of it and don't necessarily know that that's going to be the case. So if they want to, if they're worried about any challenges to the will and that sort of thing, obviously, a seg fund is a completely private contract, being an insurance contract. Just in terms of the fees, I think probate, it's only about 1.5% in Ontario, but I think there are, when you look at especially if it's more complicated, a higher net worth person, they may have lawyers and accountants involved, they may have corporations, all sorts of things, foreign properties, things that can really slow things down. So just, creating liquidity by having it flow through right away, not having a delayed payout is a huge benefit. And of course, just talking about the potential lower estate value. The fact is that, yes, seg funds are a little bit more expensive, but they've really come down in price. And the reality is that you can actually save a lot of those fees. And I think that, nowadays that shouldn't be a big part of the discussion necessarily, because there are, certainly if you take a look at our 75-100 and our prestige class pricing, that the average cost is lower than the average cost of a mutual fund. So that shouldn't be a big detriment. So just going to quickly review the seg fund contract. I think, just to clarify a couple of things, obviously the 3 main parties are the annuitant, the owner, and the beneficiary. The annuitant, you can think of as in terms of life insured. The owner is the person that's going to be paying the taxes and has control over the contract, and the beneficiary is paid out when there's a death benefit. Beneficiaries does not pay tax as an inheritance. If they're receiving it as an inheritance, the attribution of the taxes go back to the owner. The annuitant is the age that we're concerned about, not the owner. The owner can be any age. So if you think about in terms of setting up a typical contract, you also have the ability to set up a contingent owner and a successor annuitant. In a lot of cases, if it's husband and wife, you may have the husband or wife as the owner and the other spouse as the successor owner. You set up one spouse as the annuitant and the other spouse as a successor annuitant, and the child is the beneficiary. That way, when one dies, it's really joint last to die structure, essentially. The thing to remember is the owner can be any age, and the successor annuitant can be any age. So there's no limitations on either of those two. We're primarily concerned with the age of the annuitant. No worries about the age of the beneficiary, and they can be out of country, which you cannot do in a trust, and obviously gets complicated in a will. So from that perspective, there's a lot of ways that you can set up the contract. That is how I spend a lot of my time, is working with advisors to make sure this is set up properly for the unique circumstances of that family. So one thing, obviously, is the beneficiary designation. I think that's kind of overlooked in terms of how one sets that up. Obviously, there's revocable and irrevocable. Revocable means you can change it. Irrevocable means that that person has to sign off on any changes to the contract, including withdrawals. The only thing that they can't impact is the investment changes that are made inside, but they can certainly impact, any beneficiary changes, really any changes to the contract. It makes it really interesting in terms of how you can set up the contract, but be careful because that also puts some real limitations on the contract as well. So one of the things that we're probably all seeing is that, particularly in Canada, we're having, as time has gone on, the idea of the nuclear family has largely dissipated. There's many, many families where there's multiple families living together and cohabitating. You've got second marriages, multiple children from different marriages. So from that perspective, things can get a little complex in terms of how to structure the assets upon death, and certainly seg funds gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of how to structure that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the case studies. Obviously divorce rates, is still a big thing. So again, going back to the blended families, the annuity settlement option gives you a huge opportunity to set up a trust structure, totally free, built right in. From that and the ability to equalize distributions to children from the first or second marriage, again, gives you a lot of flexibility there as well. So for all the various complex dynamics there's a lot of different ways you can set up the seg fund. And again, that's where certainly I work with advisors pretty consistently in terms of setting that up. In terms of the annuity settlement option, there's a lot of flexibility there as well. I mean, obviously, you can either set it up as a term certain annuity or life annuities, or a split amongst the two of them. So for example, if you've got one child, they're just not a good spender, or maybe they're addicted to drugs, or you don't want them to get the money all at once because perhaps their spouse you don't trust. There's a number of different situations that could occur. Then what you can do is pay them out as opposed to just a lump sum. You can give them a lump sum and a term certain annuity, a lump sum, a life annuity, or both a term and life and a lump sum. So you have a lot of flexibility in terms of how you structure that. But this is a huge component in terms of having that discussion with clients to say, let's talk about the kids. How do you want that structured? How do you want them to be paid out? There's usually one where they're kind of like, yeah, I like that idea. The seg fund makes a lot of sense for me. I'm just going to very quickly review our contracts. We have actually 4 different contracts. So we have your 75/75. We believe we are amongst the lowest fees in the industry there. As I mentioned, with the high net worth pricing, our prestige class pricing, that gets very, very low, near or below mutual fund pricing. And then, of course, we have our 75/100 contract. Those are annual death benefit resets automatically up to age 80. Those are every 3 years. Stay tuned. We're coming out with a new rider on that contract in the next month or so. And then we have our 100/100. And frankly, that's not the most popular contract in the industry overall for various companies. What really makes us different is that we have automatic monthly resets up to 10 years prior to maturity date. You can choose that maturity date between 15 and 25 years. And so, for example, if you choose a 25-year term, you get 15 years of resets every single month. And then so long as you hold on to it to the end of the maturity term, then you're guaranteed all of that growth. We also have a death benefit reset every 3 years on that, which is optional, or it's 100% based on deposit. That is available for our prestige class pricing as well. Also, I did not mention our 75-100 plus, which is between ages 80 and 85. You can get up to 100% death benefit, but there's no resets on that deposit amount, but certainly available for up to age 85. I talked about our 100-100 product being fairly unique. This is just a very quick example. This is our BMO US Balanced Growth gift in our prestige class pricing, so it's 250,000 or greater. And what you'll see essentially is that $250,000 deposited 8 years ago on January 1st, 2017 would have grown to, sorry, I can't see here, 431,000 as of November 2024. That was the last reset for that year. And so that was cumulatively a 73% growth, and that would have been locked in through the monthly resets. So certainly lots of growth potential for assets within that 100-100 option. We do offer chargeback 2 and chargeback 5, so a 3% commission on chargeback 2, 5% commission on chargeback 5. So that's a 2-year schedule for the chargeback 2, prorated every month. Then we have the chargeback 5. That's a 5-year schedule, goes down 20% each year on the chargeback. The trailer fee kicks in year 2 for the chargeback 2 and year 2 for chargeback 5. It does jump up in after year 6 to a full 1%. Then, of course, we have your front-end load as well as F-series in both nominee and client name. So lots of flexibility. You can hold different options all within the same account, except for, of course, F-class. I did want to talk briefly about our advisor loyalty program. So that is ongoing this year. It's based on assets and sales. So long as you hit $1 million of net sales, then essentially you would get 4 basis points on all of your assets. If you hit $2 million, it's 5 basis points on all of your assets, including the sales for that year, or $3 million in net sales gets you 6 basis points on all of your assets. So as you build your assets with us over time, you continue to grow your loyalty payouts. We think that this is a good way to structure it because as compliance rules are coming down and some of these programs may come into question, we believe that this one is structured truly as an advisor loyalty program. I mentioned our prestige class pricing. If you look at the average savings, it's at $250,000, and it's based on all of our funds. It's done automatically. There's no special codes. As soon as you get 250, you automatically go in. And at on the 75, you save an average of 26 basis points across all those funds, 25 basis points on average for the 75-100, and 40 basis points on average for our 100-100. So if you invested that savings over on $500,000 over 10 years, those are the dollar amounts that you would have saved. So certainly can add up over time. So in terms of the BMO Insurance Advantage, as I mentioned, we've got the 4 different guarantee types, so lots of different options, automatic resets on those, particularly the 100-100, as you saw, it's a monthly reset, which is completely unique, does not push out the contract with those resets, and the fees are very, very reasonable in that 100-100. In terms of investment choices, we have a number of individual ETFs actively managed, as well as ETF portfolios, all priced exceptionally well. And as I mentioned, the high net worth pricing as well. And of course, overall, our pricing is very competitive. We've gone through a real drop in 2023 for our fees, and we're always looking to see if we can keep our fees lowest. So with that, I'm going to move into the 4 different scenarios or case studies that I think will really add value in your discussions with your clients about seg funds. So keep these in mind as you're talking to clients, because you never know, with having this in your back pocket, it could really open up a big opportunity. I often come across these where this really helped to land the case for the advisor. So the first one I'm going to go through is called gifting with control. So in this case, Charles and Janet, Charles is 58, Janet's 56. They have significant non-registered assets, and they have one son whose name is Adam at 25. They want to gift an early inheritance to Adam while maintaining control of the assets. I think this is going to come up often as the price of housing is as it is, and people want to give a warm handoff, as it were, to the inheritance rather than waiting until they pass away. And there's a couple of good reasons for doing that, which I'll explain in this case scenario. But I think one of the big advantages to doing this is just lowering future taxes on the growth of the investments, because as Adam is only 25, his tax rate will potentially be significantly less. Also, if they wait to pass on these assets until they pass away, as you may be aware, all of their assets are taxed in all at the same time in the final return, and that typically is at the highest marginal tax bracket. So it does save paying the highest marginal tax bracket all at once on those assets later on. So there is an advantage to giving it early. The thing is, though, Adam may or may not be good with money, and so they want to make sure that they maintain control to make sure that he's going to be using it for things like housing and education and that sort of thing, as opposed to buying a Ferrari. So in this case, what's important is the irrevocable beneficiary designation. So I mentioned earlier that that limits certain changes to the account, and you can use that to your advantage in this particular situation. So in this case, Charles and Janet, they gift a cash inheritance to Adam. In this case, we're going to set up the contract such that Adam is the owner and the annuitant. So he'll be owning it, and it'll be based on his life. Since he is the owner, as I mentioned, he will be taxed on any future growth of those assets. So any T3s or what have will be taxed to him. When ultimately he sells the units, all the taxation will go back to him. However, the access is going to be controlled by the parents, both Charles and Janet. Why? Because they've named themselves as irrevocable beneficiaries, meaning that Adam cannot make any changes to this account unless they sign off on it. He can change investments, but he cannot do any large lump sum withdrawals. He can't change the beneficiaries. So basically that contract is in place until essentially they sign off on that. So when he decides that he wants the money, he can certainly ask them for that, and they can sign off on it, in which case it'll get paid out. So it's a great way to lower the taxes on those assets, still give Adam the assets early, but still maintain control. So obviously, this also helps to avoid the probate and estate fees and everything else, as I mentioned. If he happens to be under the age of 18, it can be set up as an informal trust, in which case it will roll over to his name fully at age 18. They will maintain control until they pass away, at which point he then can name new beneficiaries, and that may be a wife and kids or whatever it may be. So that will change ultimately when they pass away. And of course, they can always sign off on that earlier. They don't have to die to necessarily change their own beneficiary designation to somebody else. So it's a great solution again for gifting early. One of the things that, when we talk about setting up trusts in Canada, why would we set up a trust? Well, reducing estate tax liability, protecting property in the estate, avoiding probate fees, privacy, all these things can be done with a trust. However, they can also be done with the seg funds. There's legal fees, accounting fees, what they call a deemed disposition, which is a 21-year rule on trust, meaning that after 21 years, it has to be wrapped up, and that creates a disposition, where seg funds do not have that rule, so it can go beyond the 21 years. So how do we structure a trust like scenario for Bob and Margot? In this case, they're both on their second marriage. They both have children from previous marriages. Bob has significant wealth and wants to ensure that Margot is looked after if he passes, but he also wants to make sure that most of the assets are passed on to his children, Anna and Ben, and wants to prevent Margot from changing the beneficiaries later on. So he wants her to enjoy the benefits of owning it without making changes to the beneficiaries, or if she gets remarried or moving the assets over to her children, that sort of thing. So how does he go about setting up an income plan and a legacy plan? And in this case, obviously, there's going to be a level of control that's going to have to happen beyond the grave. So how do we structure that? In this case, you can see that Bob has $2.5 million of non-registered assets. What he's going to do is he's going to buy a seg fund, and he's going to, in this case, he's going to purchase a 75/75 because he wants to keep the fees low, and he's going to set up a systematic withdrawal plan. So he's going to withdraw from those assets gradually. In this case, when Bob passes away, what he's going to do essentially is he's going to name Margot as the successor owner and the successor annuitant. So essentially that contract will roll over to her name. Because she's a spouse, it will roll over tax-free. That contract will continue under her name. And in this case, what he's going to do is he's going to name Anna and Ben as irrevocable beneficiaries. So in this case, he's decided they both will get a 50% share. And since they're irrevocable beneficiaries, Margot cannot make any changes to the contract except for investment choices unless Anna and Ben sign off. In this scenario, Margot's son Craig, or Craig, is not going to access any of these funds. She perhaps will have her own assets that she'll pass on to him. But in this case, Bob wants her to be able to continue to get that systematic withdrawal plan unchanged. So essentially, if she wants to take out more than that, she'll have to get Anna and Ben to sign off on it. If she wants to make any changes to the contract at all, other than investment choices, they have to sign off on it. So when Margot passes, because they're beneficiaries, they'll get paid that as soon as she passes away. So basically, he set up the systematic withdrawal plan as the income plan, and now he's set up the legacy plan for the two children. And again, that's using the irrevocable beneficiary designation. The third scenario is where George and Claire, George is 54, Claire is 50, they're both on their second marriage. They're looking to preserve and transfer their assets to their 4 children. So George has 2 children, Derek and Matt. Claire has 2 children, Polly and Tom. They're fairly complex family dynamics from their first marriages. And the reality is that they want to pass on to their children in a very structured way because each child is a little bit different. So in this case, they're going to be looking at the annuity settlement option. So how they've structured essentially is that George, in this case, has set up a contract where, he's the owner of the annuitant. He's named Derek and Matt as his beneficiaries. It's a $500,000 non-registered account. He could invest that in either 75-75, 75-100 if he wants the death benefit. And essentially, what he's going to do in this case is Derek is going to, when George passes away, Derek will get 100% of it in a 10-year term certain annuity. So essentially, that will automatically purchase that term certain annuity when George dies. You, the advisor, will get paid on that annuity if you're still the advisor on record. And in this case, Derek cannot spend that money until he receives his annual payment. So he'll be limited as to how much he can get. In the case of Matt's a little bit better spender. He may have some initial needs for that money. So what they decide to do is give him a 50% lump sum and then 50% in a 5-year term certain annuity. And so in this case, each child is a little bit different. Claire, on the same side, basically, again, $500,000 of non-registered assets, could put it in either one of those 2 contracts. In this case, Polly and Tom, she wants Polly to get 90% in a 3-year term certain annuity and only 10% in a lump sum. So in this case, Polly is obviously not a great spender, but they want to get a little bit of money in her hands. In this case, Tom perhaps has needs right away for that money, or just is a much better spender. But Claire decides that Tom is much more trustworthy for the money, perhaps, and gets 100% of it in a lump sum. So you can see that you can split the annuity settlement option up in a numerous different ways for each different child, rather than putting it in the will. And in this case, Derek and Matt, Polly and Tom, they have no idea what each other got. So unless they're the executor on the account, it's completely private. There's no knowing who got what and how much. So that privacy really gives them that flexibility of not feeling like one child is being, favored over another or anything like that. They wouldn't necessarily know how much and what each person got.
So sorry to interrupt, Greg. Just want to let you know
Yep.
we got a few questions coming in the chat and about
Yep.
4 minutes left. So I just want to make sure we leave ample time.
Yep. Just about to wrap this up. So I'm going to kind of skip past here. So I already talked about the annuity settlement option. The last scenario I want to talk about is someone that's over the age of 90. So in a lot of cases, you cannot buy a seg fund typically over the age of 90. Certainly for us, age 90 is the last year to purchase our 75-75. In this scenario, the client is 94. They still want to pass on the investments to their children, but they want to buy a seg fund. But in this case, they're too old as annuitant. So how do they structure it? Well, in this case, what you can do is, as I mentioned, the owner can be any age. So essentially, she can retain control of the assets. She receives the tax bill, but it's not based on her life. She can name one of her children as the annuitant. And then essentially, the child would then become the successor owner as well. So when she passes, the child becomes successor owner. They're still the annuitant, so the contract continues. And essentially, the beneficiary would be Agnes, because if the child happens to pass before her, it rolls back into her name. So the way that essentially we're doing this essentially is we're going to structure it for each child, because you can't, you can only have one child as the annuitant. So essentially, you could have a successor annuitant, but in this case, if you want to structure it so that they take over each contract, you would do a contract for each child, and then you could just allocate the amount that you put into that. So these contracts would continue on into the children's names, and then they could decide to sell it or keep it. And but again, because the annuitant is the child, you can just continue to roll it over in their names, and they can benefit from the death benefits, or just if they want to, maybe they're a little bit older and they still see the advantage of owning a seg fund. I think with that, because I'm coming up on time, if we want to maybe, the last thing I'll just quickly tell you here, the estate wedge strategy, one last very quick comment would just be, if you want to position a seg funds for the clients, talk about using a sleeve of their non-registered assets as a seg fund. It's a great way to create liquidity in the estate. We do have pieces on that as well. So Jonathan, I think I'll just pass it over to you, and we'll try and answer any last questions.
Appreciate it, Craig. That was great. And it's nice to round out our agenda with some wealth management talking about seg funds and how they can be used in the estate plan. And I know a lot of advisors are trying to navigate this space, so it's good to know BMO's there to help. All right, so my friend Bill Ambrock from beautiful Vernon has a question and a comment. So he's essentially looking to find out why we don't have monthly switch available for BMO funds. Can you speak to that, Craig, or is that something we got to
Oh,
take?
it's like switching between the different funds. Oh, like sort of like an automatic rebalancer.
Looks like it, yes.
Yeah.
Have funds
That's
with
a good
BMO, but
question. As a matter of fact,
haven't.
it's something that I've brought to the attention of our esteemed management in terms of something that I think would be nice to be added. You'll notice on our slide here that we just launched an e-app. We spent millions and millions of dollars on that. It's been a real focus of ours recently, just to get that out, and we've thankfully done a fantastic job of that. And so what we're now doing is we're in a process of actually expanding our focusing back on the contracts, launching new features, new account types, all that kind of stuff. So there is a big push certainly to expand the features. That's one of them that I've put forward, is the idea of the automatic rebalancing. And that can work, or it may not work. In the last 10 years, if you rebalanced out of equities and fixed income, it may or may not have been helpful for you. So, I like the idea of the option, and we'll certainly, I'll reiterate that, it is something that we're looking at.
Great. Thanks for speaking to it, and thanks, Bill, for the question. We appreciate it. So we'll go rapid fire for the rest, if that's okay, Craig.
Yeah,
So we have a question here. CB2 and CB5 have trailer fees over commissions. If so, what is the rate?
Yeah, so the trailer fees for the CB2 starts after year 2. It's 100 basis points. And by the way, that's on all of our funds, including fixed income. We don't drop our fixed income trailers. On CB5, we pay 50 basis points after 24 months, again, on all of our funds. And then after the 6th year, it goes up to 100 basis points.
Great. The next question, loyalty bonuses start from first year or start of second year?
So it starts same year. So for example, this year, if you hit $1 million in up to December 31st, then you would qualify. If you didn't hit $1 million by then you would start qualifying as of January.
Alamgir's got lots of questions, which is awesome. Last one from him is, up to what age can we transfer TFSA, RIF, LIF, or non-registered accounts, external transfer, and opening a new account?
Sorry, I'm not sure if I quite caught that. I mean, basically, the owner, as I said, can be any age. I mean, we can transfer for all those account types. But in terms of maximum age, I guess, the only age restrictions would be the annuitant's age. You know what I mean? But I'm not sure if I quite caught.
We'll take that one offline. Maybe Craig.
Yeah, sure. Let's take a look at that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then just 2 comments from both Pamela and Gordon, just commenting on how great the presentation was. Looking forward to learning more. So
Awesome.
to you.
Well, I appreciate everyone's time. Glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks for being with us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So.